let's go right into it. Where do we get to? Verse 5 we've done.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, just to make sure you don't forget, in verse 1 and 2, Nagarjuna says that, well, verse number 2 is saying that phenomena do not exist, afflictions, aversion, so it takes the three root aversions, the three root afflictions, attachment, aversion, and confusion or ignorance. So those three do not exist inherently, and then the reason is given in number 1, because they arise in dependence on other phenomena. The phenomena here are conceptualization, that take to mind the pleasant, the unpleasant, and error. Okay, so it's in dependence on misperceiving, pleasant, unpleasant, and error. So you could read it a different way, but they always arise from other conceptualization, other thoughts. So they depend on thoughts, misapprehensions of reality, and they also arise in dependence on the pleasant, the unpleasant, and error. So even before attachment arises, there is a sense of, an exaggerated sense of the pleasantness of the object. The same is true for anger, an exaggerated sense of the unpleasantness of the object. And before confusion arises, there's a mistaken view of reality. Okay? Or, confusion in the sense here. Alright, that's number 1 and 2. So therefore, afflictions are dependent on other phenomena, cannot exist inherently. Then if you wonder, well, okay, so they don't exist inherently, not as real as they seem, but they still cause us a lot of hardships. Now, do they have some solid basis? The solid basis would either be a person or a solid kind of mind. But as we've seen in this analysis, there's neither a solid self that serves as a basis, nor is there a mind that an inherent mind that relates somehow to these afflictions. Okay. Then verse 6, in verse 6,
how is 5 Chittamatra?
No, it's not Chittamatra, but I'm saying as an example, if someone were to say the mind, so the Chittamatrans would be saying the mind, okay, as an example. Okay, then, let me just look for my... what chapter is it? Chapter 23. Yes, 23, okay. Sorry, I just need to look at my notes. Now we're looking at the causes. Now, from the point of view of the causes, previously it just mentioned it's dependent on other things. Afflictions, like the 3 poisons, they're dependent on other things, but it didn't really specify how it is dependent on its causes. Now, here it's talking about the pleasant, unpleasant, and error. They do not exist inherently. So the afflictions, aversion, anger, and confusion, they arise from something pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, or error. We could say error. So pleasant, unpleasant, and a wrong perception. Based on that, the 3 poisons arise. And they're just, the 3 poisons are just, they're just symbolic for all the other afflictions. So taking the 3, it's true for all the other afflictions too, but just mentioning what are called the 3 poisons. 3 poisons are also important from the point of view of the 12 links that we already described, saying that they are like one of the causes. The root cause being ignorance, but also aversion and attachment, giving rise to different karmic actions, and then the 12 links described. Alright, so now saying that those 3 afflictions that are non-exist inherently because they depend on a cause, now it specifically says they cannot exist, the 3 poisons cannot exist inherently, not only because they depend on a cause, but also because the cause they depend on doesn't exist inherently. Okay? Now, I think pleasure, pleasant and unpleasant in particular are quite interesting. If we look at our own mind, when you perceive an object, I don't know, food, a type of food that you really like, when you perceive it, when you eat it, there's pleasure. We think the pleasure is in the object. But what is actually this pleasure? It's a state of mind. It's the result of karma. Our pleasures, our pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings, they are the experiences, they are the result of karmic actions in the past. Actually, they are the result of karmic actions in the past. So when we experience pleasure in a certain situation, of course, this karmic action this karmic result doesn't ripen randomly. It's not like one day it rains and I feel very happy, and one day it rains and I feel really miserable. Usually, the rain or certain factors that I like or dislike can also, or because of my states of mind, they can also lead to the triggering of a certain karma, but don't have to. So with regard to a certain food, I have the karma to experience it as pleasant. So I eat it, I experience it as pleasant. What's very interesting is that the first bite is always so pleasant. And then the karma, because this incredible bliss that I may experience because I'm hungry, that is reduced. So the karma is not as strong in the second step. Anyway, so without going into that more, the point is that the pleasure which we see in the object is actually, first of all, not in the object. It's found in the mind. It's our mind reacting to the object, and then our mind projecting the pleasure into the object. Actually, it's just our mind reacting to it as a result mainly of karma in the past, and only secondary as a result of the object. So really, if you want to experience more pleasure, we should focus more on which karmic action we experience and not about trying to get the object. Am I making sense? we choose the secondary cause. Yes, the object is that which triggered that karmic response, but the main cause was the karma. The main cause were our actions. But instead of now accumulating virtue in order to have more of it, we may actually steal the object. So we're foolishly selfish, as so Minister Dalai Lama would say. It talks about we're selfish, okay, right now, but they're self-cherishing. Let's live with it, let's work with it. Work with it. We're working against it. We want this, we want that, but then we actually do actions that harm us. So I think this is very nicely put forth in this verse here. Pleasant, unpleasant, and error. In particular, I'm just focusing on pleasant and unpleasant. What is that pleasant? It seems to be in the object. It's a reaction of the mind, mainly as a result of karmic actions in the past. Does that make sense? Then he goes on to say, now, okay, so, sorry, just to clarify. So, therefore, our afflictions, to go back to the three poisons, they cannot exist inherently because they depend on pleasure, displeasure, pleasant feelings, unpleasant feeling, and error. But since those don't exist inherently, how can that which depends on them exist inherently? Okay, that's one reason. And then looking at the focal objects of the afflictions. What do they focus on? They focus on the sense objects. In general, it's the sense objects, perceiving as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Of course, the focal objects are also the causes that give rise to pleasure, etc. First, we perceive them with the sense consciousnesses as a secondary cause, the sense objects. They're perceived by the sense consciousnesses, giving rise to the sense consciousnesses, sights and sounds, etc. They give rise to the sense consciousnesses, which come along with some pleasure, with some feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And then it gives rise to the different afflictions. In many cases, not always, but can give rise to them. Therefore, let's look at form, sound, taste, tangible objects, smell, and phenomena. These 6 factors are considered to be the basis of attachment, aversion, and confusion. Did I read verse 6? I didn't, did I? Did I read it? Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, sorry, my memory is so bad.
Can you just ask about verse 6?
Please, of course.
You know, this pleasant, unpleasant, and error. Does that make sense? Because you can read pleasant, the error or the mistaken view of pleasant and unpleasant instead of making a list of food. I don't know that this list of...
Okay, it's in Tibetan it says actually duk, as in like pleasant, tang, miduk, pleasant and unpleasant, error. You can read it that way, but you have 3 afflictions. Where does the attachment come from? From pleasant feelings. Where does the aversion come from? From unpleasant feeling. Where does the confusion come from? From mistaken appearance, from mistakes. So chinchilo, as in like error. The confusion comes from error.
Error is in
Wrong perception. Wrong perception.
Is ignorance?
The wrong perception is both in the pleasant and in the unpleasant. It's already there, isn't it? It's not another type of object.
No, but that's like...
Pleasant object, unpleasant object, and a wrong perception.
No, but it's talking about what gives mainly rise to those three. Pleasure gives mainly... Of course, it's a mistaken, but just in terms of course, the mistake is always the main cause. But let's not even look at it like pleasure directly gives rise to attachment. An unpleasant experience gives directly rise to anger. And then there's error that gives rise to confusion.
What's error?
Error, like it comes later on, it's described here. What is the error? So the refutation of the error. If you look at verse 13...
In verse number 1, it's exactly say what you said very explicitly.
Attachment, aversion, and confusion always arise from conceptualization. Oh yeah, they arise invariably in dependence on the pleasant, the unpleasant, and error. But then, I don't know whether...
It's the same thing.
The same thing, yeah.
It's the same
Tuk
reading.
damit or chinchilo. But then if you read further down, this chinchilo is then explained as separate, as a cause for confusion. Because this is just general. From verse 6 to 8, it just says in general, their causes don't exist inherently, therefore the afflictions don't exist inherently, those three. And then 9 to 12, it talks about attachment and aversion not existing inherently because their causes don't. And then from 13 onwards, it talks about the error separately.
Which is ignorance in general?
Yes.
Yeah, ignorance is because of error. This is not a neutral feeling. So this is just what I get from the commentaries, just explaining them separately. But again, like I think Boaz, again, he is right in that you could just interpret it in that way too. That's why in Sanskrit you take both interpretations. I don't disagree with you. I just want to put one view forth that I get from the commentary. And then you can also read it like from the pleasant, the mistaken pleasant, and the mistaken unpleasant. Right? That gives also rise to error. That's not wrong. So you can read it that way too. So both interpretations work, which is beautiful. What do you learn from this? Our view of the pleasant is mistaken. Our view of the unpleasant is mistaken, number one. But also you have the pleasant that gives rise to attachment, the unpleasant that gives rise to aversion, and and error which gives rise to confusion. You can read it both ways. Does that make sense?
But it's basically the three poisons, right?
Yes, basically the three poisons. You're absolutely right. Basically the three poisons, representing the other afflictive emotions. What was that? Was anything more?
No.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with the list of three objects.
No, it's unusual.
To me,
Usually it's
error
pleasant.
is not an object. There is a pleasant object.
Mm-hmm.
There is an unpleasant object.
Right.
There is not a...
Yeah, it's not saying an object as such, but it's like the confusion, like timuk in Tibetan, for instance, the word that is used as the third. It can also mean you're just kind of in the dark about things because you're in error. Beforehand, you misperceive something, so you have an erroneous view.
That deals with your attitude towards it, not from the way it appears.
Yes, but it's not saying the object. I said the causes. I said the
how
causes.
It appears to you pleasant,
Yes.
it appears to you unpleasant.
Right.
It doesn't appear to you mistaken. It doesn't appear to you error.
It appears to you mistakenly. You just don't know that it appears to you mistakenly.
That's what about
It
ignorance?
doesn't.
Oh.
It appears to you pleasant. You know it appears to you pleasant.
Right.
It doesn't appear to you in the same way mistaken. You know, you can
You
tell,
can
or
perceive
the Buddha
something.
can say it's a mistaken view, but it doesn't appear to you. The appearance is not to be mistaken.
You're not aware that you're right. Yes.
So I don't see that there are equal parts of the list.
I mean, I can only tell you, that, you see, it's like the pleasant, the unpleasant, and error. This is like how I look at it right now. Pleasant, unpleasant, and error. Those are the causes that give rise to the three afflictions. Your interpretation is another possibility, which I think works nicely, but I would...
So
I would say the pleasant is a cause of the attachment, unpleasant of aversion, and error of confusion. Now, the way you explain it works perfectly well. Also,
Is it
It's the phone of the Dharma friend.
It's the Dharma
so
phone.
we're checking its energies.
it's not his fault. It's just an error.
The phone doesn't have an owner.
No owner.
No owner.
No owner of the phone, literally. Okay, but anyway, please keep in mind that the discussion is helpful. Okay, so there's a wrong, perceiving pleasure wrongly without being aware of it. I think that's what Bo is saying, right? Without being aware of it, perceiving pleasure wrongly, and perceiving an unpleasant feeling, an unpleasant object, right? Or an object as inherently unpleasant, so therefore it's erroneous with that respect. That is one way of looking at it, and another way would be seeing them as separate causes for the separate three poisons. Only, do you want clarification?
I'm just saying, maybe it could be that it's pleasant, unpleasant, and natural, but still an error. Like you can perceive some, in that way you can see all three as like pleasant, unpleasant, natural, but the natural one still could be wrong.
Okay, sure. Whichever you like. No, I mean, whatever works for you. Yeah,
But
I'm
it's
not saying
humans.
that's not what I meant,
Okay.
but it doesn't matter. Honestly, whatever you read three things of it and it benefits you, well, fine. It's not like, well, I don't know whether Nagarjuna's intention is such, but there's different ways of interpreting this. Okay. Now, next one is the focal object. That is very interesting, where modern science helps us, right? Form, visual form, shape and color. It seems to be inherent in the object, to be blue or red or what have you. We've already heard. I mean, from a Buddhist point of view, it's still blue. We would say it's blue because what appears to you is blue. It's the object. But then the causes that give rise to it are light waves to that appearance. So blue is the unique experience we have when we see it. This blue does not exist in the object in that way, objectively. So that's a beautiful way of looking at it. There's no blue inherent in the object, because otherwise we wouldn't need light waves, what have you. There wouldn't be light waves. We would just see what's actually there. But blue is the unique experience, the subjective experience we have as a result of light waves, as a result of the sense, the retina, the part of the brain, all the coming together, plus a former moment of awareness. As a result of that, you have an awareness of blue. So therefore there's blue. And it's not a mistaken appearance of blue. Sometimes we could be mistaken because we're colorblind, etc. But if everything is fully functioning, so you don't have any fold in your bases, etc., no brain damage, you're not blind, what have you, so then you perceive blue. Does that make sense?
And yet we said that we're not sure all blues are, we all perceive the same blue.
We still think we all
Yeah.
perceive the same. We know this intellectually, but it feels like, I want that blue dress, that's such beautiful. We never think like, oh, I want that dress with this light wave. With this, right? It doesn't feel that way. It's like we keep the science out of the store when we go shopping. This aspect, so we know it intellectually, but it's actually a good proof. It's very good reasoning that establishes blue does not exist inherent in the object. Does that make sense? Sound does not exist inherent in the object, because otherwise it would be the way we felt. Okay, it's right over there, and everyone perceives it in the same way. That's how it feels. So I think, especially with sense objects, the modern science now, they really help us to explain why the sense objects do not exist inherently. Pressure waves in terms of sound. When you listen to a beautiful piece of music, it's not out there in that way. There are the causes and conditions that give rise to that, plus your own basis, and then as a result of that, you have the unique experience of music. Without a mind, no music. Okay? So in answer to the question, when a sound falls in a forest and there's no one to hear it, does it make a sound? No, there's no tree in the first place. Because a tree has a certain color.
There's no forest.
There's no forest. A tree comes with a certain color. Like, what kind of tree are we talking about that has light waves instead of color? It has a certain shape. Shape is only possible because what we call conventionally a tree is the tree that is perceived. Unless you talk about a different tree that no one sees, like a light wave tree. I don't know what that would be, but we wouldn't call it a tree. What we call a tree is something that has color and shape. Shape because it has color. Okay? Color because it has shape. It goes both ways. If the color is that what we subjectively perceive, you need consciousness to see it. Now don't ask me, what about there's no one there to see such and such and we only see it later. That's again getting obsessed with time. But if there's no one to ever perceive the tree, ever, I'm saying ever, I'm not just saying in that moment, then there's no tree. Okay? Alright, no, I don't want to go into that discussion if I can avoid it. Can I?
Just
Clarification, please, of course, by all means.
So if there is, I don't know, some place with a lot of suffering, like in many places in the world, okay? And there are people who deny it, okay? Because they are not aware of it, because they do not create contact.
But then there's still suffering because there's still the people experiencing the suffering. Suffering means there's no mind. So for those people who experience it's still there.
Okay.
Manu? Okay, great. So, form, sound, I'm sorry for not taking questions. I know they're endless once we get into it. Just because, of course, there'll be at some other times, of course, when you can discuss, and you should. I thought this idea of getting together, you know, when you have your own groups, if you want to discuss it. But honestly, it's just for this, I think we need to bring more of these texts into Israel and bring more teachings, like have teachings on those. I mean, I'm not saying more, I mean, already you have from other people, but oftentimes I give these kind of like teachings, like just general topics, and that's nice too, just in my case. But I feel very strongly about why not take these ancient texts and go through them, okay? And at other times we do something else. But yeah, introducing them slowly. Maybe next time do just 7th chapter, which is so important as a suggestion. All right. Okay. Now, form, sound, taste, and tangible objects, smell and phenomena, these 6 factors are considered to be the basis of attachment, aversion, and confusion. Alright, makes sense. Number 8, well then, the question that arises, how can they appear? How can they appear? Well, they appear, but they fool us in us believing they exist objectively. In that way, they're like a city of Gandharvas, they're like a mirage or like a dream. Yeah, I know the question. What is the city of Gandharvas? Okay. All right.
And we're being fooled, we're fooling ourselves, not that they fool.
Yes, you're right. This is a very good point. It's not like that they fool us. We are being fooled by them. We may sometimes make it sound like that. We even say there are a truth of suffering. The objects we perceive are a truth of suffering. Like we blame them. But it's actually, because they exist subjectively, it's what we perceive. And because of our mistaken appearance, very good at what you said, it's very important. Because of our mistaken appearance of them, therefore we say they are false. But we don't blame them. We say conventional truth are false. They appear one way and they exist in a different way. But that's not like they're kind of like, I'm going to appear differently, I'm going to fool you. Not like that. It's like the mind that perceives them in a wrong way. Okay. So, how could the pleasant and unpleasant arise? No, sorry. So, okay, yeah, sorry. Okay, so we have here the example of Gandharvas, city of Gandharvas. This is just, there are actually 8 analogies of illusions. 8 analogies usually used in the scriptures, in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, that describe something that appears one way but exists in a different way. And again, it's not from the side of the object. Sometimes it sounds like it's the object just because we have an objective sense of things. And since we have that sense, according to that sense, sometimes it is explained as if it was the object itself. But actually, of course, it's the mind. So the mind is fooled, and there are these 8 analogies. So one is the reflection in a mirror. It's one analogy. Moon in water, a reflection of moon in water. Echoes. echo, rainbow, dreams, city of Gandharvas, I explained them, mirages, and magical illusions. Those are the eight examples. And the city of Gandharvas, it's explained in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. So the Gandharvas, those are said to be celestial beings. Of the celestial beings, there are different levels, if you like, depending on the virtue that they've accumulated in order to be reborn. So here, these Gandharvas are said to be lesser, not as high in terms of the moral kind of conduct that was a cause for their rebirth. It was not as high. But again, think they don't exist objectively. So if you have no problem with the hell realms, you should not have a problem with the celestial realms either. Could be anywhere. We have like a sense it's up in the sky, but it could just be basically anywhere, because it's just a different karmic result and a different karmic experience. You're all familiar, I think, with a liquid, a bowl of liquid, which a human being perceives as water. A celestial being perceives as nectar. A preta being perceives as
Blood.
pus and blood. Pus and blood. Oh, that's cute. Pus and blood. Yeah, so pus and blood. No, it's cute. So anyway, perceives it that way. So that's actually saying we can all be here, come together, and you have those three beings. Just in terms of a result, because of our karmic actions, having different experiences. All right. Now the Gandharvas, it's one type of existence, and it says that there's like this illusion-like city that can appear, that seems to be a real city, that appears to be like a city of Gandharvas. It's actually not a real city. When you get closer, it isn't one. And with this Gandharvas, there's some discussion on it. I don't know how important it is, but like Gandharvas in Tibetan, they are described as scent eaters, smell eaters, or scent eaters. And then they only live on smell. They don't need to actually eat food, they live on smell. But then Vasubandhu apparently kind of said this is what it means, it's Gandharva. But some people would disagree with regard to that being scent eater. So there's some discussion whether that's what the word means. Boss, do you know anything more about
Gandha is smell. So.
Gandha is smell? Yeah. And some say that I just did some research on it some time ago, and there was some discussion about is it really the smell, as in like smell eaters, or another word, and I forget which one it is. But the Tibetans have come to the conclusion it means scent eaters, because they only eat scents. They don't need, of course.
Celestial musicians.
Pardon? Yes, they're musicians. Oh, very important. They are celestial musicians. They're usually depicted as like musicians, and their kind of head. It's usually depicted with the flute. So it's part of... It's also in Hinduism you find the same explanation, but there's no contradiction. It's like there are different realms of existence, so why would there be a contradiction? And why are they described? Well, in some of the scriptures, well, the Buddha himself, of course, was able to perceive them, but they're also beings through meditative abilities. You can perceive different beings of different realms. I mean, big deal. People say they see ghosts, right? I mean, this whole idea of ghosts, it's not like they're actually beings reborn in the form of a spirit. And some people can see them. Sometimes you can see them. So there are these explanations. I know it sounds a little weird. It sounds a little bit like we're trying to bring in ghosts, etc. But I don't know this mystic of... I mean, just they're actually beings who are like, have a subtler body than we do, and some people can't perceive them.
They became celestial beings due to a good karma.
Yes, absolutely. Very important what Manu says.
How can we... and then the good karma will end, and then...
Yes.
So how can we do good karma without becoming a celestial?
So Manu is getting right to the point. We don't want to be... I mean, celestial being sounds all nice, but it's in terms of Dharma practice, it's not good to be born in the celestial realms, because we need more suffering to be able to evolve properly, and the human existence is just the best. So what is the cause for rebirth in the celestial realms? Is accumulating a lot of virtue. So better not to be too virtuous, right? No, but we don't want that either.
Maybe resting a little bit.
And so, as Nissim says, we make prayers. It's like making prayers to be reborn in the human realm, and that can also, through the power of the mind, accumulating virtue, that it may assist that aspiration to then result in rebirth in the human realm. Okay?
With good family,